Welcome to Hacking Hypermobility Podcast.
I'm Luna.
And I'm Shelli.
And we're two bendy mamas.
Hacking Hypermobility.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. We have had some great conversations talking about our medical evaluations for hypermobile humans. And that is a lot of information to take in. So we polled our listeners and our followers on TikTok to pick the next topic. And what was that?
Yep. So the polls show that you all want us to talk about both ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. Yes. So good thing we have a little bit of experience with neurodivergence.
Yes. But for our listeners who have not quite wrapped their head around this, can you remind them what exactly is neurodivergence?
So neurodivergence is a term going to be more inclusive to the diversity of neurotypes or the different ways that we humans think. Many of us in the disability space use the term, so not everyone is aware of what it means. Neurodivergent, though, is actually a non-medical term describing people whose brains developed or work differently. So while there are separate medical conditions or psychiatric conditions that fall under neurodivergence, we have some shared experiences and united voices speak louder. So two of the common conditions associated with neurodivergence are attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, and autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, but there are others. So it's a relatively new term. An autistic sociologist and pioneer in autism self-advocacy named Judy Singer actually coined the term neurodiversity in the 90s. But Harvey Bloom, who is a writer that she corresponded with, popularized the word, and it really came into the cultural space in 1998 in an issue of The Atlantic, and said neurodiversity may be every bit as crucial for the human race as biodiversity is for life in general. So for context, what were you doing in 1998, Shelli?
I was drinking and drugging in college. That's what I was doing.
College?
That was the year Halloween, 98. I tripped on acid, dressed up as Monica Lewinsky in a blue dress, because that was right around the time that all that was going on.
Yeah. So 1998 was the year I could have started driving, but I was too scared to go get my license. So I was 16. Yeah, I was in high school.
I was 21.
Yeah. So these words, these terms really come from the generation before, like us, our generation, Gen X, elder millennials. And I'm sure the ongoing dialogue about how we as neurodivergent humans refer to ourselves will evolve. There's lots of talk in the space about the words we use. But medically defining normal helps us identify, understand, and support different neurotypes or the various ways human brains develop and operate. So neurodiversity is a term that refers to the unique ways a person's brain develops or grows. Neuro, of course, referring to the brain and thinking, and diverse referring to the wide range of the spectrum of variety. So the way human brains develop and think is diverse. There are lots of origins. Nature and nurture, of course, play a role in neurodivergence. However, most of the conditions that fall under this umbrella term have genetic origins that science is unraveling. So even autism spectrum disorder, or ASD itself, appears to be associated with several genes and present with a wide spectrum of types. Those of us under this umbrella term, neurodivergent, have neurodevelopmental differences, and a variety of differences, actually. You know, the unifying term of neurodivergence includes several medical conditions, mental health disorders, and learning disabilities, and even some conditions that occur after development that have caused divergence. So there's a variety of causes.
The other end of the spectrum is a term known as neurotypical. So there's no true normal brain function, but some of us are more affected and disabled by our differences than others. Those of us that are neurodivergent have, in general, a common experience for living with these differences, the differences that are in thinking, feeling, socializing, learning, communicating, just how we're perceived by others. Different neurodivergent conditions have nuanced differences, though. So, Luna, what are some of these conditions?
So, Shelli, I'm going to share some infographics on the screen for listeners that watch on video. And I'll link these in the show notes also for those of you that just listen. These resources are from Sunny Jane Weiss, who's an advocate, educator, and author about neurodivergence. And you can find even more on their website, the Lived Experience Educator. So some neurodivergent conditions under this umbrella term include autism spectrum or ASD, previously also known as Asperger's syndrome. However, that term is no longer used due to its origin with the Nazi regime. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Previously, it was known as either ADD or ADHD. It's now one term. And as we've already mentioned, those two, there's also several others, and I'll list some of them here. Down syndrome, dyscalculia. I can't speak today.
I never say that right.
Dyscalculia, which is difficulty with math and numbers. Dysgraphia, which is difficulty with writing. Dyslexia, which is difficulty with reading. Dyspraxia, which is difficulty with coordination. So these are all learning disorders that have to do with how the brain processes or perceives sensory input, frequently in the interoception of the input being a challenge. Intellectual disabilities, there's a wide variety, and several mental health conditions like bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, and more. Sensory processing differences, which sensory processing is not a disorder unto itself, although there's talk of, as we mentioned before, of making that its own separate disorder. Social anxiety, a particular type of anxiety disorder, Tourette's syndrome, traumatic brain injury or TBIs, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and complex PTSD. And even non-mainstream gender differences or sexualities have also been included.
Okay. So I've seen that term neuroqueer probably is used for that. So one of the important aspects of being neurodivergent is an experience of marginalization. And so many of us mask or hide parts of our experience so that we can try to blend in the neurotypical world, right? Support and inclusivity are vital for us to improve our quality of life because many of us cannot overcome our neurotypes or disabilities to fully participate in mainstream society. So we have to mask in order to survive. And those of us who face additional barriers of discrimination like race, gender, a more obvious disability, and other more obvious physical differences, we have been historically oppressed. So these are just some of the things we face and why we mask.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize that the idea of neurodivergence and neurodiversity is above all a way to include those of us that are different and have been othered. It's a way to elevate the voices of all of us together in a unified way. Not all of us can safely unmask. So, for example, here in the US, it is unsafe for a Black autistic person to be publicly unmasked, for example, and they've, been victim to murder.
Violence, murder.
I think we can best express this with Judy Singer's words. She wrote, "For me, the key significance of the autism spectrum lies in the call for and anticipation of a politics of neurological diversity or neurodiversity. The neurologically different represent a new addition to the familiar political categories of class, gender, race, and will augment the insights of the social model of disability. The rise of neurodiversity takes postmodern fragmentation one step farther. just as the postmodern era sees every once too solid belief melt into the air, even our most taken for granted assumptions that we all more or less see, feel, touch, hear, smell, and sort information in more or less the same way, unless visibly disabled, are being dissolved. So, interestingly, that is the quote from Dr. Singer that established the term neurodiversity. And she was already pointing out the intersection of disability and autism, but commonly neurodivergence is perceived as separate from physical disabilities by neurotypical and people that are able-bodied. But something that united both Shelli and I to enter this public space of disability awareness is the fact that neurodivergence is seen more commonly in hypermobile humans than in the general population. We experience significant health issues and physical disabilities. And it really seems to compound the issue of people like us not being medically identified, diagnosed, and supported early enough in life. A recent 2022 study in the UK also noted, quote, in neurodivergent adults, there's a strong link between the expression of joint hypermobility, dysautonomia, and pain. Other studies have specifically looked into the prevalence of ADHD and ASD with both hypermobility spectrum disorder, HSD, and the Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, EDS. But that particular study said it seems to be more prominent, a condition of comorbid neurodivergence when joint hypermobility is paired with dysautonomia and pain.
Interesting.
So I will link some of the studies in the show notes. It's something that's very actively being studied and researched.
Yeah. So the medical research, while that's interesting to some of us, most of us probably, it's important to hear from actual people who live with these conditions too. Our lived experiences have shown the challenges that we have faced with these inherited connective tissue disorders and affected not only physical symptoms and our hypermobility, but also the perception of pain associated with our disability and the way we experience life rather, and how we get support, if we get support.
Right. And while the exact mechanism of the cause of this connection is not fully understood, there are some ideas. Dr. Leonardo Zaccante is a professor of medicine. He's a neuropsychiatric doctor at the Integrated University Hospital in Verona, Italy, and he has been researching autism and neuropsychiatric conditions, particularly in the pediatric field. And he and his team have proposed the connectome theory, which is actually a whole model of approaching neuropsychiatric neurodivergence and the connection with physical disability. I will link the article in Frontiers in Psychology along with some other medical articles in our show notes if you want to read further, but I'm going to just kind of summarize it. I'm not going to go into all the details because it's a very detailed model and theory. So the connectome theory proposed an updated interpretive model to be used to understand particularly the ASD, autism phenotypes, but made a very important point that it can be applied to all other neurodevelopmental disorders and should be used for practical clinical support of both the neuropsychiatric and physical needs of people like us. The proposal has many important points, but the overall connectome theory is that the genetic and epigenetic changes to connective tissue cause many physical changes in a gradient, and that the neuropsychiatric differences cannot be separated from the bodily differences that we experience. In other words, hypermobility and autism occur on a spectrum and cannot truly be understood as separate conditions. The issue is in the tissues.
So, how are we going to get these stories of neurodivergent experiences, Luna?
Neurodivergent humans can try to explain their experience, right? There is great research, like we said, all around the world, but our voices are much more accessible to bring awareness and understanding. So we're going to let you, the listeners, get to know us a little bit better by interviewing each other about our experiences, by interviewing each other about our experiences with these things. Shelli,
Yeah.
I'm going to interview you first since I've already rambled on. Okay.
Okay.
And it will let me warm up to the idea of talking about these things.
Okay. And also, if you're still not ready at the end of it, you don't have to.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. All right. I'm going to knit while we do this because
that's a good idea because
it just will keep
it is
me
a student-focusing STEM.
Yeah.
A STEM, by the way, I guess we should define that, is a stimulating or calming or focusing physical behavior. It's a way to regulate.
Yep.
So, first question for you, Shelli, is how are you neurodivergent?
I am neurodivergent in that I am autistic and I have ADHD and I probably have some dyspraxia, but I am having coordination problems now, but it's not obvious of the cause. Like it could be something that has developed in that time. So but those are the ways I'm neurodivergent. Yes.
And at what age were you diagnosed with those two distinct diagnoses of ADHD and autism spectrum disorder?
So I got diagnosed with those at the same time.
Interesting.
When I was 44 years old.
So recently.
Yes. And actually, it was just a month before my 45th birthday. So, I mean, it was 2022. February 2022. My birthday is in March.
So for context, this year.
This year.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
So 10 months ago.
Yeah, it's so
still
fresh.
You've just birthed your neurodivergent baby.
Well, actually, I birthed a few neurodivergent babies in the early aughts, if you want to get technical.
So who diagnosed you?
So, well, first I diagnosed me.
Interesting.
But I chose to seek a clinical diagnosis, which is not for everyone. A, it's not accessible to everyone, unfortunately. And B, it's not always a safe thing for everyone to pursue. And we can get into that later because you're asking about me. But I went ahead and sprung for the professional diagnosis, not necessarily because I wanted the autism one definitively. I knew that I needed medication for my ADHD. And I also knew that no doctor was going to give it to me without a legit, like on paper, you've been evaluated. Here's the tests we did that most people agree is a good test. So you can get the medication. And that's why I did it. Because at the time, originally back, I thought it would help me keep my shit together so I could get back into the workforce because I had just gotten my master's degree that I impulsively decided to get because I'm changed careers.
I wish I could see my face.
So anyway, so I went to a neuropsych who over several hours and a couple of days of tests diagnosed me. They did all kinds of tests, but I was diagnosed with ADHD, autism spectrum disorder. I found out my IQ. I found out my working memory is trash. Yeah, so it was very insightful and eye-opening to get that I was not surprised.
So you had the inkling because of, I'm assuming how you're going to answer this next question. Is there anyone else in your family who shares these neurotypes?
So yes. So the first officially diagnosed person in my family with autism spectrum disorder is my son, who is 20 years old, and he was diagnosed by Kennedy Krieger Institute, well-known institute here in Maryland, in 2007 when he was 5. So, and it was just, it was like they said, actually, in 2007, his original diagnosis was, it was really weird the way they gave me the information. Like this is going to be a little bit rambly. Like at first they were like, well, he has this brain injury. And I'm like, what? Like they don't,
yeah.
I don't know. And then it was kind of like, well, we put this because of insurance. Like it's this whole like racket, right? So it was, I hadn't fully processed it. This is, back in the day, like what all that meant
This is a
for
decade
him and me.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 2007. Like it was just like I initially started thinking something was maybe up in 2005 and 6, 4, 5, and 6.
When he was like a toddler.
Yeah. But then I like gaslit myself out of it because he read books and like got hugs and talked in complete sentences and all of these things, right? So anyway, yeah, so that was different. So he was the first one. And it wasn't until, well, then I had my daughter evaluated shortly thereafter. And she's 3.5 years younger than him. She had major sensory issues. Like she would not eat Cheerios, very tactile defensive. But a really fantastic baby, like overall, like, and we didn't know, like, whereas Rob wasn't like a good sleeper and like needed, like, was just a fussy, like, like Carolyn was just like, hey, I'm chilling here. Like, so we were like, we didn't know if we just were
until
less.
She wasn't.
Right.
That's how my daughter experienced childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then we had her evaluated and they said that she was not autistic. They were like, no, she just has some sensory issues. She's not autistic. And I was like, okay, you say
Same
so.
Story. Yeah, same story with my kiddo.
Yeah. And then, so that was 2008, 9, where she was evaluated and was fine. And wasn't until like 2017, 2018, when I was kind of like, I'm in my 40s now. I feel like I should be, like, I have my shit together, but I don't have it together. I'm really good at having people think I have my shit together.
So, like, what shifted your perception? What shifted your perception to think about this differently in terms of yourself?
I think I just increasingly struggled with, I felt fake. Like, I am not a liar. I'm like super on, like, I shoot from the hip. Like, you know how I feel about something. I don't, unless it was like about, I was increasingly feeling like I was putting on a persona when I was out in the world. And the gap between who I felt I was on the inside and that persona was getting just too big.
When do you first remember feeling like different or other like that?
In recent memory. Like, are you asking like, was I aware that I had something else going on when I was like younger, maybe? Or
yeah, like when did you first feel like, hey, maybe I'm not like other people? Why am I like, why is this persona thing in my life? Why am I experiencing life this way?
Okay, so that's hard. Oh. Okay, look at me being, I can't, you know what?
We don't have to answer this one. You may have to think about that.
Well, I have one. Like, I can definitely tell you as an adult. It was at my dad's house in 2020 on his birthday, and it's pandemic time. I didn't want to go to a birthday party because it was a pandemic.
Yeah.
But my sister and my niece had flown up from Florida, which I also was like, why are you getting on a plane and bringing Florida-ness to whatever?
Right?
Like,
It was like the
it was,
worst place to travel from during that
it
time.
was, I mean, there were so many, it was like all of these different, I mean, it really just came to, like so many things in the world that came to a head in 2020.
Right.
So did that, right? So my mom had come up for the weekend with my nephew because he was still in high school. My mom was raised my niece and my nephew. And my niece was in college. So no, she was done with college. I can't even keep, like, anyway, it's all
Probably
blending.
wasn't able to go to college if it was 2020. Maybe been on hiatus even.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah. So they flew up. It was like the weather was still warm. Like, it's October can be dicey here. Like, I didn't like it, but I was like, they're going to do what they're going to do. I will see them. And then, I masked, kept my distance, did whatever. Well, my dad, my sister and my niece were staying at my dad's house because he has more space. And the day of the get together, where it was just supposed to be a barbecue, like, and sit outside and my understanding of the event was different than what occurred. And so I was under the impression that it was going to be like like just family, right? And my niece texted my mom, and my mom was like, Shell, Alyssa just texted, and she wants you to know that she found out there's going to be more people than what you thought. So, and actually in hindsight, look at my family recognizing that
They were aware. Yeah.
recognizing that I need information that, you know what I mean? Like, looking back on that, I'm like, oh, wow. They were like, oh, Shelly's not going to do well with this surprise.
Before we had a framework for this also, it was always kind of a joke of like, as long as you like tell Evelyn exactly what's going to happen and when and how, she's fine.
Yeah, that's like me with, as long as I understand the why, I won't, like, but if the why doesn't make sense to me, or if I don't know it, good luck getting me to get on board. Anyway, so that was when I noticed. As a kid, I mean, I definitely, elementary school, like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, I definitely got a sense that, like, I figured out how to blend in, but I definitely felt like I was kind of the weird kid. Like, I was like the medium weird kid. Not like I was weird enough to like be noticeably weird, but I wasn't like that one over there. Like, I mean, it was the 80s. It's like, that's
Right.
does that make sense? I think you would have to be like a Gen X person to like, or like your age.
No, I get
like,
it. I think
yeah,
as an elder millennial, like we were kind of in the
same,
similar
yeah,
boat. But also I notice, this is kind of more of a vague explanation for you. Like you weren't able to give like a concrete knowing or answer to that part of the question in terms of your childhood.
right,
And I think not to interject on
yeah,
answering your question for you, but I think it's important. You may want to come back to that and like kind of try to understand why. When I started going into like therapy and was undoing, kind of the walls that I had up around those things, and I started
yeah,
and unraveling some of those things from childhood, it became much more obvious and helpful to allow me to work through some things now. But anyhow, so you said your most dominant neurodivergencies are the two main diagnoses: ADHD, autism, and
Yeah.
ADHD. Does one seem more dominant to you?
I did read these questions ahead of time, and I've been thinking about this one. And I think it depends on the day.
On the day
Or
situation.
I really it does. Or just, but not even, because in some situations, the Audie's in charge, and some others, like, I'm full on squirrel. Like,
yeah, it's a very interesting thing to think about because they conflict in so many different ways, but in some ways they're so
I think
from
it's
each other.
much like you mentioned earlier, where it's hard to separate like hypermobility and it's the same. Like, it's I definitely, finding out I had both and knowing the inherent yin and yangness of them on occasion, I like to say I'm a walking contradiction. Like, I feel like I don't make sense.
Yeah, and
sometimes.
I think that's why we're missed.
100%. Yes. So, like, back to, like, there definitely was a time when I was younger where I knew I didn't fit in, or I was weird, or didn't necessarily belong, but I, like, belonged enough. Like, I wouldn't have been the one where you would have looked at the picture and said, this one doesn't belong.
Right.
Like, I belong, like, it would be like, that one needs a stylist. That's what it would have been. Because I did, there's memes around of, like, Spirit Halloween, where it's like midweek cutie instead of Wednesday.
Yeah.
That's like me. Like, I was like the Spirit Halloween
cutie.
Yeah, I was the midweek cutie and trying to be Wednesday.
I feel like that's a common experience amongst us.
Yeah. So
hashtag midweek cutie.
I'm gonna brand that.
Yeah.
That's mine. Don't steal it, internet people.
So what is the most challenging aspect of neurodivergence in your life currently at this point in your life?
At this exact look, I'm already starting to say it. At this exact moment, it is executive functioning.
What is that to you?
To me, it is getting through the day without having to stand around and be like, what am I supposed to do now, and how do I do it? Oh, it's this time. Like I'm really grateful that my husband still works from home, even though, like,
In
some
sim
days.
mode?
Yeah. Executive functioning, and sometimes the rumination is annoying, because, like, there are times where I just ruminate on stuff. I want to be done ruminating on it, but, like, I haven't figured out how many times my program has to run on something before I'm done. Like, I've definitely figured out certain things, certain habits I have. If I'm having a conversation but I miss a beat, but then I know it, like, I'm gonna still complete what I'm saying because my brain has to finish that process. Like,
I think the most frustrating thing to me in what you're explaining here is, like you said, I think I'm aware of it. But I think what's even more frustrating is, like, there's so much of this stuff that's going in the background of our experience that we're not aware of, or that we feel we have absolutely no control over.
Yeah.
So I think, is that what you're kind of saying, is like
that sounds right. Finding words also is me. I struggle with that. So I have aphantasia, so I can't picture things. And then there are some times where I just cannot, the words escape me.
I understand that, sort of, because I struggle to articulate verbally the words and thoughts that are in my head. So, like, I write better, or it's easier for me to communicate in writing or text or whatever.
Oh, 100%. Like I could never have been on debate team, like a live
Okay.
action
So someone
debate.
cannot contain his laughter at us right now.
What does Marlon have to say?
What do you have to say, babe? He's just nodding his head.
Is he like, oh, I know who these people are? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, you want to hear something so funny that makes so much sense now that I'm like diagnosed officially? Me and my son both get this. We call it the 5 minutes of anger.
Oh, yeah. Just the burst and then done.
It's just like something doesn't go right my way. 5 minutes of anger.
Kind
And
of
then
like
it's
me
done.
shaking down the fridge and I have absolutely no idea why I did that. And then it was fine. That may have also just been pregnancy hormones, but like things like that have happened, like where you just
Yeah.
you express those feelings and or frustration or anger, those hard feelings come out and then they're out and you're like, well, what just happened? You don't even know.
Yeah. And then also something else, I like do not want to speak of it ever again.
Right? The
Like
mortification.
I just shut the door on it. Bye. No, that's back there. Nope. Moving on. I know it's not exactly healthy.
Compartmentalizing emotions seems to be a common coping skill amongst us, whether it's healthy or not. So,
which is probably why I self-described as a robot. Like I would be like, I feel like I'm a robot. I only cry when people hurt animals. But not anymore. Now I cry all the time. But
I was also I cry a lot. So, you know, we asked you to compare the autism versus the ADHD.
yeah.
So now tell me, is chronic illness or your neurodivergence more challenging? Why?
Ooh. I think the chronic illness right now.
Because it's at the forefront of your daily challenges? Or?
And because I know more of what I'm dealing with, and there are some days where I feel good. Like today I feel pretty good and I'm sitting here knitting while we're doing this, and like later this afternoon, depending on how many hours we do this, there's other things I want to do today. But then I know, okay, I need to not.
You need
if
to
I did all this
yourself.
knitting, right? So like,
hoard your spoons.
Right. I haven't gotten the formula down. Like, okay, before, or maybe it's the neurodivergence. So before I knew I had all of this going on, right? I obviously had all of this going on and I didn't know it for a while. I would like hit to the point where I would like hit a wall, make myself sick, and then be like out of commission for 7 to 10 days. Right. So I don't do that anymore. And so, no, that's because I'm aware of my chronic illness. So yeah, it's the chronic illness now. So having to manage, it's really kind of, again, a little bit of both.
Because the ups and downs of the health issues are much more high to low and varying.
Yeah. And so I'm trying. Yeah. So the chronic illness now is before I would have much bigger ups and downs, I think, because I didn't know about the neurodivergence. Right. And so I'd kind of still force myself to do things. But now I know about the neurodivergence.
So you can see your experience through that filter and adjust better. Yeah.
So I do adjust better. But now it's like, okay, managing my chronic illness on top of that. So like, okay, I'm feeling a hyper focus come on, but I gotta make sure I am careful about what I choose to hyper focus on because my body is feeling this. Right. So I guess it's just a shifting. I feel like I'm in the final place. I've come to terms with my brain. I feel like my brain and I are friends now, mostly.
So I think Shelli just hit on the major hack for hacking hypermobility in this episode. It is to learn about your neurodivergence and how to support yourself, and you will better manage your health. right?
Yeah.
So how has this experience with neurodivergence changed over time for you with, like as you learn to support yourself? What has like become easier or more difficult as you've aged, that sort of thing?
Hmm. Even though a lot of things in my life are harder than they used to be, it's easier. Like I actually feel comfortable now in my own skin,
Mm-hmm. Comfortable with who Shelli is.
comfortable with who I am.
Mm.
Only because I think I always was in the way back of my mind, but there was still this, what is the right word? I do a lot of things in like similes or metaphors or example because again, the words to describe are not generally with me. I think the way I handled it as I was growing up was a way to not worry about myself, was to busy myself worrying about others. So like I had a volunteering problem. I would do anything to I would do so that I didn't have to be.
Mm-hmm. Many of us go into like helping professions or
Yeah.
yeah.
So over time, I realized while I was doing a lot of good in the community, that it was at my own expense.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I had that day at my dad's, that was like it was the neurodivergence kind of hitting a wall. I was having some like pain issues kind of hitting a wall. Like all of that was kind of coming to a head. And so
I think many of us experienced hitting that wall in the pandemic. I don't think you're alone.
yeah.
So you said you do cope with, your neurodivergence better now that you're, diagnosed, more aware, that sort of thing. Do you have
Yeah.
any helpful neurodivergence oriented resources or skills that you can share with our listeners?
Ooh. I might have to come back and edit this
Okay.
in.
We
So
can
yeah, I will edit it in. I'll do a little short, but for sure. I mean, initially,
Hi, it's Shelli. I don't really have any tips to add, but I do want to write about it at some point. So you can find links to my tips and tricks on our website, hackinghypermobility.com, or on my personal website, helpimalive.net. Okay, bye.
I just sought to find people like me. Or initially, when I first was I was, a parent. I was looking for resources. Um, one of the suggestions I will make is definitely find a resource that's from someone in that community.
Hmm. So someone with lived experience or
Yeah.
yeah.
But that's always been the most helpful for me. I tend to, one thing I never did was one thing I never did was think about how I thought about things. Like I never sat and considered how my brain arrives at a decision. I just trust my brain and knew that it would do stuff.
And what's funny is I've only recently learned that you cannot trust all of the thoughts in your brain.
Yes, that was new and really, that was scary information a little bit
It's weird,
to be.
right?
Yeah.
Your brain tricks you because its ultimate goal is survival.
Yeah. That's annoying.
Yeah. So
Stupid brain.
speaking of like survival and neurodivergence, we kind of already touched on like the idea
Yeah.
of having that mask.
Yeah.
How do you see Shelli's mask?
Shelli's mask was Shelli's mask was a confident, has her shit together.
Boss babe, Virgo energy.
Yeah. If
Yeah,
you want,
my mask was definitely about like having my shit together, being super organized, super helpful.
yeah, if
go-to person.
you want something done, Shelli will either do it, know how to do it, or will know someone who will.
What was that phrase that your friends use for you? Let go and let Shelli?
Let go and let Shelli. Yeah. Yeah. I was like the planner of the events.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in hindsight now, like, okay, do I really like planning things, or did I like subconsciously just fall
You were
into
fulfilling
always
the need to have knowledge and control of what was going to happen to make yourself feel safe.
Yeah, 100%.
Not to like psychoanalyze you, but that's me projecting.
But that's also exactly what I was doing, because it's easier for me if I was in control. I always tended to try to control whatever bits of the situation that I could.
Yeah, because so much of it we cannot. Right.
Correct.
Yeah. So you said when I asked you that question, you said was. So like, is your mask past tense? Do you consider yourself unmasked?
I would say I am actively unmasking.
So it's in process.
Yeah, for sure.
So who sees you unmasked? Who is safe for that?
I would say there are stages.
Me too.
Kind of like stages of dress. So
we are not trying to do the Emperor's New Clothes here.
No. I would say, I guess if you think of, I won't even say I wouldn't even say I even know at this point. Perhaps there is a fully unmasked version of me somewhere that has made an appearance, but I have not.
Like in verse.
I
feel sorry.
I'm not aware of it yet. Like I haven't. Cause like I will, if sometimes I'll catch myself, like if I'm like dancing around and then like I see the cat, I'm like, oh, like you know what I mean? So
even the cat. Yeah.
If I see them noticing me, it's all about people noticing me. So like
being perceived, we don't enjoy that.
No. And I was actually trying to explain that to my friend Carrie the other day, because she wanted to, like, I hadn't seen her. Like she kind of went through this bout where she was sick. And then we were supposed to hang out, but then whatever. She's like, well, I want to go out to lunch with you. And I was like, I don't want to go out to lunch. And she's like, we haven't hung out. And she's like, well, especially this time of year, like it's Christmas, like no.
Yep, it's awful.
And so yeah, I was trying to explain to her like why and how. I was like, well, I just don't want I don't want people to see me. And she's like, well, we can get in a booth and be in the back. I was like, that's not it. I was like, I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know who. I don't want anything unexpected. Like, and I couldn't. And she's like, well, everything's like, you don't know what's going to happen at your house. And I'm like, well, yeah, but that's different.
And it's not that you don't want to be literally seen. It's that you don't want to be perceived and then be obligated into some sort of social interaction, right? Am I explaining that? Or
yeah, like I don't like lately. I feel very like sometimes like struggling to, like I had this incident when I was picking up my son from college. Like we were at Sheets and I was gonna get a snack, but then I was like ordering on the thing and it was like, do you want cheese on that? And then I was like, I just want just a chicken. I just want like I was trying to get to the thing and it was like, here's your total. And it was like $7 or $8. I was like, for this stupid chicken. And then I got mad and I was like, no, I don't want it. And my son is standing there and he's like, Mom, are you okay? And I was like, I don't know what I want to eat. And now I have to pee. And he was kind of just like,
yeah.
What do I do?
Like, how many times have you experienced this? Like, is this just a me thing? You go to like, the fast food restaurants, like if you're in the line or whatever, or there you see the menu to order and it's like numbers. And like there's all the pressure because like there's a line or there's people or they just kind of have an attitude or it's a rush.
Yeah.
Or maybe they can't hear well because you're going through the speaker or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, I want a number 5. But then when you get the meal, it's like a chicken sandwich and you wanted a burger. And then you say to them, no, I ordered and they're like, no, you ordered this. And then some like 17-year-old is telling you that
you're a moron.
You're crazy. Yeah. Is that just a me thing?
No, I have found that I seek out places to order food where I order it online or by like without having to talk to a person.
Yes.
Like I don't want to talk to you.
Anyhow, that's just, to me, it was something I realized is just like a good example of the social and communication deficits that we have in like a subtle way that like people just don't think about.
The whole thing on my porch, like I like to sit on my porch and watch what's going on in my neighborhood.
But not be talked to.
But do not talk to me. Or if you are going to walk by with your dog, just do this. Like give me a nod. I don't. Yeah. And so that's why I'm working on fixing my front now so that I have a little bit of, because once my tomato plants all died off, I didn't realize how much of a natural screen they were on my front porch. And then it was like people could see me and I was like, ew.
So, you've told me that like neurodivergence has informed just simple aspects like sitting on your porch. What else has your neurodivergence affected in your life? Like you kind of touched on career. What about like parenting, identity stuff, like any of those things? Where have we not touched from?
Well, it definitely explained, it explained just the weird relationships I had with people or friendships that I thought were friendships, but they weren't friendships. Or how many times I had been, people assumed I was a bitch or I was intimidating or that I thought I was better than everybody else.
Oh my God, the intimidating word. Here it comes. Yep.
Ready? Oh, you're so intimidating. I didn't go on any dates ever. I'm like, I'm not attractive or what? No.
I one day was called
I'm attractive
by, like,
and I don't know how to talk to you, so I'm gonna look weird and you think or like they're like, oh, she's not talking to anybody. Look at her, she's pretty. She thinks she's too good for everybody.
Like when we're not actively masking our like they call it the flat affect.
Oh,
like the resting bitch face or whatever it is. Like we don't follow those social cues or social nicety all the time if we unmask or we get fatigued in masking and people perceive you as or intimidating, particularly those of us that are female presenting people. Like, we're cultured to be smiley and polite all the time, and as soon as we're not, we're a bitch.
That I just even trying to think of like what my because I had a hard time when we initially were seeking a diagnosis for our son. Initially, we got some pushback on him being autistic because of what he could do. So imagine me trying to be like back in 2007.
Yeah.
No. So even now when I'm like, well, what as a kid, what did I do? Or like, which of my behaviors am I falling back into now that might have been annoying? Or what did I do that was repetitive or like maybe an indicator, but didn't raise any alarms, right? So like my son, boys, you think, oh, boys are destructive, boys are gonna like do this and that, and so like
demonstrative and expression,
right? So he had his, you would see a boy with a monster truck going, pretending like a truck, right? No, my son had a monster truck and turned it upside down and was like tiggy, tiggy, like spinning the wheels, right? Or he took his blocks and had all of the blocks that had the side that had an animal on it were facing the same direction, and then it was like all the letters facing the same direction.
I just had the most insane memory when you were explaining this.
Yeah. What was
I remember like myself as a child
Yeah.
playing for literally hours in the kitchen floor with one of those like pullback wheelie cars that if you pull on them, it would like spring load and drive.
Yeah.
And I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. And I remember doing that for so long, just this one thing over and over again, playing with the wheels and looking up at the clock and be like, how did 3 hours go by?
Yeah. I used to roller skate in my basement to
Good stint.
Madonna's True Blue.
I used to put on whole choreographed dances in my basement to Michael Jackson, the Beach Boys.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So all of that kind of suppression stuff, masking tends to cause what we call in the community burnout, right? So burnout being where you hit that wall, as you were describing earlier, and you just, no matter what you do, you have to address your needs to function.
I wanted to go back. I didn't. So I quit working full time in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work for the federal government. I struggled a lot with that. Now you would think because of like rules, my whole career working for the government.
Yeah.
In some way. I mean, I was on a contract before I became a civilian.
No, I mean, like, did it affect your whole career doing that? Like, was there a point in your career where you didn't feel affected by neurodivergence, or?
You know, when I didn't know at the time what it was. So I just thought I had some weird undiagnosed chronic illness that was in my head.
Just wasn't in your head.
Yeah. But yeah, in hindsight now, for sure, because like I didn't, there was a great TikTok the other day. I can't remember if I sent it to you or if I favorited it. I'll have to go back and try to find it. But it was they were talking about the difference between neurodivergence and social cues. So working for the government, or if you're in the military, chain of command is like a BFD, and
BFD stands for big fucking deal.
Very defined, yeah.
You do not go above so-and-so's head, even if you know that person's going to have to go to the next person anyway. That's just not what you do. So like that kind of hierarchy never made sense to me.
Cultural hierarchy, yes.
Yes. I really, really struggled with that sometimes when the issue was either urgent or like, I don't know, it seemed to me like I struggled because answers were there and available and nobody wanted to fix anything. And that I couldn't.
Bureaucracy is very triggering to us, yes.
Yeah.
So
eventually.
How did you handle that? I mean, you said you left work.
Well, so I don't work full time anymore. How did I handle it then?
What did we say? How old are you? And you no longer work full time because of your combination of disability and neurodivergence, right?
That's
a big deal.
Yeah. I'm 45 now. I quit working full time in 2013.
So that significantly, shortened your career,
36.
Your earning potential, your retirement,
Yeah. But I did try to go back because so I quit working full time and then I was bored. So then I took a contract job at the state of Maryland it was a 3-month, contract job. They wanted to extend it, but I was like, ugh, I remember why I got out of working for a government agency. Right. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll just be a substitute teacher because then I can like pick and choose and I can have control, except for, you're a substitute and you go to a school and then there's changes. They will just take you out of whatever thing you signed up for and stick you in somewhere else. And I had a freak out one day when they pulled me out of the slot that I had signed up for. it was a class I was familiar, and because I was very deliberate. I'm very deliberate in all of my choices. I had deliberately chosen this class on this day because I knew the class and I knew the teacher and I knew that's what I signed up to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I arrived in to clock in and they were like, oh, we pulled you. You're going to go cover. It was like, I don't even remember what class it was. And it was going to be like the whole day. And I'm used to like breaks at a certain time. Like I planned right.
Right.
And I went into the AP's office. I think he was on the phone with somebody. And I was like, I am not doing what you just scheduled for me.
I am interrupting.
If you ever want me to sub here again, you will not be doing stuff like that with my schedule. Thank you. And I walked out. And then I'm thinking, the office ladies were probably like, who does this little substitute think she is? Yelling, I don't care. What?
You're stunned to speak to you.
Yeah. And well, first of all, I had already had a run-in with this teacher because of issues with my son and bullies. So he was already
of course.
I wouldn't say he didn't I think he was afraid of me. And
because you're intimidating, remember?
I'm intimidating, and apparently I will bust into your office and yell at you if you make me
and we
teach.
wonder why we're perceived as intimidating.
And at that moment, later on that day, I was like, I did nothing wrong in this situation. Oh my God, yes, I did. So wrong. And I did apologize later, but I couldn't even
Do you know how many times I've yelled like a maniac to the people that I love because they did me wrong somehow? Yeah, I know. I totally know. Yeah. So what else? Clearly career.
Yeah. My marriage, we were separated for a while, and shortly after my son was diagnosed. And in hindsight now, it's
big life stressor. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, knowing now, explains so much.
Yeah.
My one sister and I don't get along, never have. I'm going to go ahead and say never will. I'm okay with that. That's just kind of where it is right now.
Yeah.
It also I can look back now and, I don't think I'm not saying my parents made the right choices with things they did, but knowing now that they definitely have some of that trauma baggage they carried around too, it helps me frame it differently as I process it. It's still not okay.
That whole idea that we can move towards acceptance and say, well, my parents did both the best they could do with what they were given, but also they hurt me. And you accept it, and now what are we doing? Right.
So yeah.
You've touched on, how deeply, you've experienced burnout and that sort of thing. How have you reignited the parts of Shelli that matter to you? I heard you say you tried some different things, like going back to work, and that didn't necessarily work. So you kept trying things, right?
So I, before I quit working, I tried running. I was like, I need this activity. Running will help me get my shit together with all of these things. I volunteered. So I took on more. I wasn't working full time anymore, so I was bored. So then I just started volunteering for all of the things. What the hell am I talking about?
How did you?
My brain. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Oh, so reignite. I think I didn't do it by choice. I didn't know deciding. I didn't know all that stuff in October 2020 was going to send me down. So I think actually hitting burnout, it's kind of like Phoenixy, right? I just burnt out, fizzled. I was about to be and then it's, a little bit of time passed. I think the self-reflection is what reignited it.
Finding yourself. Yeah. The Phoenix thing is something that really kind of has gotten me through like you said, the metaphors or things that help put words or emotion to something that you struggle to express. And that's a very, very good metaphor for this. How do you stim?
Well, I'm doing it right now. So I'm knitting. I find that I am a movement. So I'm like very like foot tappy. I like music, dancing.
Big for me and Abby too.
I do this. If you're on watching me, I'm like moving my lips around.
I do that all the time.
Sometimes I'm like, like that.
Yeah.
I'll do a little sing-songy talking to myself. That's been included on some of the like clips in our podcast of me just being like dee, 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 la, 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 while I'm doing something. That's it. I like soft fabrics and things. So like at night, like last night we were watching TV. I had my soft blankie, and there's
like
a soft side of it.
Things.
Yeah, so I'll like pet my little soft blankie. I like deep pressure. Sometimes if I'm feeling like if I need to like go back to sleep, like if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll have to pace around a little bit if I'm like having any, I call it painsomnia. Like you just wake up, but you can't get comfortable. Sometimes if I put the weighted blanket on after that, that'll help get me kind of sorted out. Yeah, that kind of stimming.
Yeah. What part of your neurotype do you celebrate the most?
I think even though I'm sometimes like an anxious, like hot mess worrying about stuff, I like that in general, in most cases, I'm good in a crisis. It's like I'm good at solving a problem. If there's an emergency, I like that I have the ability to like think on my feet like that.
Yeah.
So
are there any parts of you that you now realize are neurodivergent that you've actively tried to embrace and love within yourself that you used to really dislike?
It's a tough one.
Like, what did you suppress the most?
I will change my tone and add nicer words. And I still do that.
So your communication style.
Yeah, because
I changed my tone of voice in terms of just the register. Like, I talk high and smile. I can't do it on command. I do it so unconsciously. I don't even know that I do it. So
I also, talking with my hands and stuff, I would be more animated. I suppressed that a lot because I would get a lot of comments on it.
Oh yeah, me too.
People would comment, "Oh, you just talk with your hands a lot. You're sure excited. What are you so excited about?" I don't know. These fucking birds are cool. Look at them.
I think a lot of what I suppressed was the little joys that we have in our special interests, or I think a lot of what's talked about is like how we experience or process things differently in a negative light. But it seems like we also experience like interest or joy or like connection at a heightened level as well. And I think I learned to suppress that, like hide that, like what you were talking about hiding your excitement over something that's a special interest of yours, the birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to tell people, this was so funny. I'd be like, I'm really chill and go with the flow. I can be laid back. Until I'm not.
I try really hard.
Yeah. And I didn't realize how exhausting it was to try to maintain that, right? And I never thought of myself as an intense person necessarily, right? But I'm going to tell a quick story. So there was an election, everything I fixed with the pool, the current president was being challenged by someone who wanted to come in and take over. And their main basis for doing so was, look at what happened under this guy's watch. And so I was of the opinion, because I had like fixed all these problems with the pool, I was like, well, I think I'm going to vote for this new person. They seem okay, but I don't know anything about them. So I emailed him and I was like, hi, I know you're running for president. I'm currently the treasurer and I fixed everything. And can I just meet with you and ask you a few questions? Like, I kind of want to get your take on everything. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. So I think I questioned him for, at the time, both of our kids were in both of our oldest children were in the same grade. And I was like, oh, well, I have to drop something off at Like, it was like, we were both going to kind of be at the high school at the same time. So we were like, let's just meet in the parking lot and like chat for a few minutes. And I think I kept him there for like 35 minutes, like literally like.
So by the time you were done, he was doubting whether or not he should run for the board on this board.
Possibly, but he was also like, you're really intense. He's like, this is like intense, like, and for me, and I guess in hindsight, looking back, like it was, but I guess it was
not intense. We're not camping. We're in a parking lot.
I just got that.
I'm sorry.
No, that was good. I think the reason why is I had spent so many hours of my time laboring and fixing the clusterfuck that happened to the pool.
Right.
That like we had implemented these new business rules and like all of these things to like keep it on track so it didn't happen again. And I guess my big fear was like, I knew the dude who was currently president, like that guy did whatever I basically asked him or told him to do. Like he listened to me.
Mm-hmm.
But also I knew he made bad choices and like there would be a little bit of a butt at our heads. But this guy, it was like the devil you knew and the devil you didn't. So I was like, I wanted to get more of a sense, like, is this guy going to bend to my will and do what I say?
Right.
My God, I'm so bossy. Anyway.
Okay. So here are some words so far that we've identified that female presenting autistics share. Bossy.
Yep.
Intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Bitchy.
Yes.
Are we missing him? Emotional.
Know it all.
Know it all. Anyhow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can you tell me how you experienced neurodivergent intuition?
I wish that I could figure out how I tap into it. I don't know how. I haven't self-realized that yet.
So you're aware of it. You just don't fully process how you are aware of it. But it's a thing. If you're not familiar with what we're talking about, it's a thing.
100%. And I don't know if it's just because of like how my pattern recognition is, or just when I know something's off. Like sometimes I'll know something's off, but I won't know why.
You
and
won't
sometimes
have the actual details, just the spidey sense.
Yeah. But then sometimes like I'll just see a pattern and I know the way it's gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
But I just know it. Like I'm not always able, and I don't know if that's the anomia with like, because I definitely, one of the things that came out of my testing is the gap between my expressive and receptive is big.
Yes.
And so I am taking in so much more than I'm able to.
It's disproportionate. Yeah.
Very, yeah.
I relate to that.
But because of all my other stuff, because I had that huge disparity, it balances out. Like, because they look at big picture rather than where you're struggling. And so for like a girl struggling with communication, well, look at her. She's a know-it-all bitch. No wonder nobody wants to be her friend.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have friends. But it was like superficially.
Eventually, yeah, you either have that superficial framework or you maybe found a couple of kids that are like you.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, bossy, intimidating, know-it-all.
Weird.
I mean, some of it, like, I generally preferred to be near adults or like try to ingratiate myself in like the adults conversation, because
Same.
I didn't want to
Precocious.
be.
There's another one. Precocious.
Yes. I didn't want to be like necessarily with the group with
No.
the
And
kids.
if I couldn't be around adults, I was going to hang out with the younger kids.
Yeah, or I'd find an animal to go. Do you have a cat?
Yeah,
Do you have
let's be honest.
yeah.
I did that the other night. We had to go to a social event for Evelyn's soccer team, and it was just the girls, so the kids and then the moms. And that's very intimidating to me because then like you're forced to like socialize, right? It's not like you're on the
Right.
soccer field and you can just whatever. And I realized, or I caught myself just playing with the dogs. They're
Yeah.
very cute dogs. But like I realized like that's kind of a default for me too.
Yeah. So
But,
yeah.
well, those were all the questions.
Okay. Didn't have any secret questions I don't know about.
No, those were them. Those last few.
Okay. Just checking.
Thank you for, being so open and sharing your story today too. It's been a great talk, but I think we need to wrap up the conversation today.
I agree. That's going to be a lot for me to edit. So you're very welcome. And thank you, especially to our listeners for tuning in and voting. Sorry we did a little bait and switch on you and talked about both of them. And we actually didn't go into that much depth. And I promise you, we will be. Thanks for tuning in to the Hacking Hypermobility Podcast.
If you would take just a minute to share, follow, or leave us a review, it helps us grow the podcast and spread awareness.
Yeah. Our little TikTok's growing. We're almost to 500 followers. Did you see?
I checked. It was 444, which is a special number to me.
4 is my favorite number. Oh, I love it. Let's celebrate. We did it. As of 4:33 p.m. on January 2nd, we have 1,125 followers. Thank you. Yeah. Well, we're going to wish you a healthy hypermobility. Have a happy day, zebras.
Bye, zebras.